Subclassing is obviously broken, and people have been spending so much time looking at all of these insane DPS parses coming out that we've completely neglected a discussion about how broken it is from the support side of raiding, specifically from the healer perspective. There's no better time to bring this conversation to light than now, since week 4 of the PTS patch notes have affected the healer role in ways that we haven't seen in a long time, with the set Pillager's Prophet getting absolutely gutted and Pearls of Elnathe receiving a pretty big nerf as well. And even with these changes, this thumbnail is no lie. A shout out and thanks to Rainsolo for helping me put together these healer builds, and to Facehead McGee for showcasing them for you, one of which is capable of pumping out barriers every 14 to 15 seconds. And that's without pillagers at all. And while we are going to go over this build in detail, the overall goal of this video is to go over subclassing and the most obvious implications from the healing perspective, and to discuss what I think the meta healer setups for 12-man will look like. Now, as a quick disclaimer, this is only week 4 on the testing server, and the system is very obviously easy to abuse. So don't be surprised if some of what we're seeing now doesn't go live. For now though, this is what we're looking at. To best understand why I set these healer builds up the way I did, we first have to have a decent understanding of how the meta raid comp is changing, so that we know where our buff and debuff responsibilities lie. In update 45, that is the current live patch, healer responsibilities are pretty straightforward. We need to most commonly source Major Courage through the 5-piece Spell Power Cure, and then our role is to gen ult from sets like Pillager's Prophet and Master Architect. And then our final 5th piece usually is just whatever buff we're missing, and that most commonly is PA. Combine all of this with our primary mythic, Pearls of Elnathe, and our job is simply to heal and passively gen ult while we're doing it. In update 46 though, that role is exacerbated dramatically, since the current meta DD spec decreases the support's buff and debuff responsibilities in raid. The changes seen during week 4 of PTS have made the third tree for DPSing debatable and in need of testing, but what I'm confident will hold are the Herald of the Tome and Assassination trees. Herald of the Tome in update 46 will give us 2480 pen for having 2 Arcanist abilities slotted through the Splintered Secrets passive, and 12% critical damage through the Faded Fortune passive. Likewise, the Assassination tree from the Blade gives us another 10% crit damage through the Hemorrhaging passive. So in terms of pen and crit damage buffs and debuffs, we will likely need Major Breach, Minor Breach, Crusher, and potentially Alkosh from our support. And for crit damage, we will likely need Major Force and Minor Brittle. All of these buffs though can come from the tank, and frankly are more efficiently sourced through tank trees. So what does that leave for healers? Well, frankly, exactly where we were before. We should be ult-genning machines, prioritizing strong meta sets that buff our allies based on the amount of ult we consume. Normally, that would include primarily Pillager and MA. However, this week's changes see Pillager's Prophet getting absolutely gutted, as well as a nerf to Pearls by 33%. Now, Pearls I think could still be worth using, even though Trample is an option. It just seems like we need bar space more than we do set space this patch, but Pillager, at least on the healer, is probably straight dead, to be honest. So what would we replace it with? You don't want to slot sets like Zen on a healer with Pearls, because every skill that you spend casting that is not a healing ability will result in weaker Pearls uptimes. You only want to do that if a skill is a must-have, with something like Wall of Elements falling into that category to me. These are the questions that are shaping the new meta for healers. So the way I see it, in a 2-healer comp, we will likely have 1 healer getting as much ult as possible to take advantage of a set like Master Architect, and the other healer also getting as much ult as possible, but with the primary goal being to reduce the cost of a certain ult to get as many of them as you can. But reducing the cost of your ult with Master Architect, for example, wouldn't really be beneficial because MA is maximized at 500 ult, right? So let the MA healer drop at 500, and let the other healer decrease the cost of something like Barrier to 150, Storm Atro to 140, or even Colossus to 120, or frankly anything else that you might want for that matter, to get as many of them as possible. With that in mind, I've paired MA with either Pillager if it is still worth using, or more likely Alkosh, since a healer can reach the 6k cap for Alkosh almost as easily as a DD, because this set scales off of our weapon and spell damage. If the DDs are not running the Gravelord tree and do opt for Daedric Summoning or Dawn's Wrath, Alkosh on a healer feels like the play to me in a 4-support comp. Pillager is just so gutted in week 4, it's not even as much ult as Crypt Cannon, so I mean, if this does go live, I don't know, it might still technically be worth running, but barely if it is. So since this healer is going to prioritize getting big 500 casts of their ultimate, this player should probably also be the real healer between the two, which will allow the other healer to prioritize less healing and more utility. So for this role, we will pick the Siphoning tree, likely the most important and standard tree to choose on any healer next patch, mainly because of the Catalyst passive, which gives 20 ult whenever you consume a potion. This passive plus 3 times potion cooldown and chance on your jewelry is going to be largely responsible for the gross amount of ult that we can gen, even without Pillager. In addition to this extremely important passive, the Siphoning tree gives us some other awesome utility passives as well. Magicka Flood will increase our max mag by 8% with the Siphoning ability slotted, which results in a big increase in HPS. Soul Siphoner will increase our healing done straight up by 3% per Siphoning ability, and Transfer will gen 2 ult whenever we cast a Siphoning ability once every 4 seconds. We will likely attempt to do this with Healthy Offering, an insane ranged burst heal that we'll have access to with this tree. Finally, we also get access to Siphoning attacks, an incredible skill for sustain. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Siphoning is unquestionably a must-have tree for any healer in Update 46. Our second tree will be Green Balance, mainly as a source of minor toughness and for budding seeds. However, we do get some awesome passives in this tree as well, one of which was buffed in Update 46. Emerald Moss increases healing done with Green Balance abilities by 5% per Green Balance ability slotted, which means slotting 2 Green Balance skills on the front bar will increase the HPS of seeds by 10%. Already one of our strongest sources of healing before this buff. Finally, Secluded Grove is a great ultimate to have access to for the sake of tough heal checks, like the one we're experiencing on the second boss in Ossian Cage currently. Our last tree for this healer will be Restoring Light, giving us access to a ton of useful skills, but the main one being Extended Ritual. This is a massive pot that cleanses harmful effects, offers the Purify synergy, but maybe most importantly will permanently give us a source of minor mending thanks to the Sacred Ground passive. The Light Weaver passive in this tree is really cool as well, as a nice utility to increase your allies' ult gen, and we gain some seriously good heal check type utility with a passive like mending and skills that conceptually work the same way. So with all of the pieces in place, a quick summary of this build: we will run Master Architect paired with either Pillager or Alkosh, and combine this with Pearls and the Ozezin monster. The only odd trait change to make is to make sure that we're running 3 times potion cooldown glyphs and Decisive on our front bar. For our skills, our front bar will include obvious important heals like Springs and Combat Prayer, then Budding Seeds, which we gain access to from Green Balance, and I've slotted Green Lotus as well as a nice little flex heal that will also ramp up the HPS of seeds. This is our flex slot that we can replace with something like Regen if we feel a fight is really demanding for an ability like this. And we also slot Healthy Offering on the front bar that will also activate our Transfer passive for more ult gen. And I have Soul Siphon on our front bar to buff our front bar abilities from the Soul Siphoner passive as well. On our back bar, we'll slot the basics, Echoing Vigor, Elemental Blockade, and Healing Orb, and then we will slot Extended Ritual as one of our strongest HPS options in this setup and to activate a lot of our Restoring Light passives. Then I have Altar slotted on this healer because there isn't really bar space with the other build that we're going to discuss, but this can technically act as our flex slot for something like Siphoning attacks or Contingency if we don't need to run Altar. Finally, our ultimate will just be whatever the group needs, likely choosing between Warhorn, Barrier, or Warden trees. While the MA healer will focus on healing and ult gen to build massive 500 casts, I believe the other healer's role will be to pump out as many of X ultimates as possible. In trifecta scenarios, this could be Barrier, and in fights where you're trying to push more damage, this could be the Storm Atro for Major Berserk. In order to do this, we want to pick trees and passives that relate to ult gen and ult cost reduction. To do this, we will of course select the Siphoning tree for the Catalyst passive and the benefits from all the awesome healing utility discussed earlier. We will then select the Daedric Summoning tree for the Power Stone passive, which reduces the cost of our ultimates by 15%. And this tree will also give us access to Expert Summoner, which will increase our max resources and therefore HPS. Our final tree will either be the Bone Tyrant tree for the Necromancer, whenever we have a lot of targets to use Necrotic Potency for the sake of ult gen, or far more commonly the Curative Rune Forms tree from the Arcanist when prioritizing Barrier. When our goal is to pump out as many barriers as possible, having access to the Intricate Rune Forms passive is crucial since this will reduce the cost of our shields and increase their strength by 10%. The Curative Rune Forms tree also gives us 9% extra healing done thanks to our Healing Tides passive when we are at 3 Crux. And we also gain access to Erudition, which is just a free increase to our mag and stam recovery by 18%. Finally, we also gain access to some awesome utility skills to use situationally, like Curative Surge, Evolving Runemen, Arcanist Domain, Chakram Shields, and one of the strongest defensive ults in the game, Glyphic. We will then combine all of this ult utility with the set Blessings of Potentates and the CP Shieldmaster to reduce our ult by another 15 and 10% respectively. With all of these factors in tandem, our barrier will only cost 143 ultimate. In doing some quick and rough math, we can calculate that with our base ult gen, minor heroism from our potions, major heroism from pearls, a decisive staff, the transfer and catalyst passives from the siphoning tree, and the ult restoration from replenishing barrier, we should be able to get a barrier off every 12 to 15 seconds, and this doesn't even factor in other potential sources of ult gen like Pillager or Crypt Cannon. That means that in a standard 5-minute fight, one player can solely be responsible for at least 15 barriers, and then you can add even more on your support if you would like. It's seriously insane, and this math tracks similarly with Atro too. If you really want to press damage, you can bring the cost of Storm Atro down to 140, and then Curative Rune Forms becomes less valuable because our ult is no longer a shield. So we could do Bone Tyrant for even more ult gen, or Dawn's Wrath to bring that cost down to 138. That's a Storm Atro every 12 to 14 seconds, again without factoring in sets like Pillager or Crypt Cannon. So to recap this build, we will run SPC, PA, Potentates in the Pearls Mythic with the Siphoning, Daedric Summoning, and most commonly Curative Rune Forms tree. Our niche trait and enchants worth mentioning will run Decisive on the front bar and Infused on the back bar with 3 times reduced potion cooldown on our jewelry to maximize our catalyst passive. For our skills, our front bar will include regular healing oriented skills like Springs, Combat Prayer, and then Echoing Vigor on our front bar to proc PA. I have Healthy Offering slotted as a ranged burst heal that will also proc our transfer passive. And then we have one flex slot on the front bar where I would probably slot Regen with Soul Siphoning as our front bar ult for the Soul Siphoner passive. On our back bar, we have regular healer skills like Elemental Blockade to proc our back bar enchant, Evolving Runemen to build Crux for our 9% healing done via the Healing Tides passive, Bound Aegis to increase our max mag by 13%, which will give us a massive increase in healing done, Siphon for the Magicka Flood passive on our back bar, and for a bit of much needed sustain help, and then either Barrier or Storm Atro as our ultimate of choice. And this is just the beginning of the creativity that subclassing is bringing to ESO. Perhaps the most interesting changes to endgame PvE though will come to the 12-man raid comp, a topic that I dive deep into in this video that you can check out next. And if nothing's popped up yet, don't worry, it's coming soon, so hit that sub button so that you can be among the first to see the way ESO endgame is changing forever.